I just got to say it. I mean, this is a lot of what we're talking about is indicative of some kind of Western or U.S. cultural or governmental collapse.
Absolutely.
That's why I think a convention of states, we've already got people who are chatting saying like they think it's a bad idea for a variety of reasons, which we'll definitely get into in a bit. But what I want to say is when you take a look at what's going on with China, what do they have? They have a strong authoritarian structure, a monoculture. That is the CCP, the Chinese Communist Party. People like to often point out, like, we're not talking about the Chinese people, we're talking about their government. And I'm like, yeah. Look, I think colloquially it's understood. We're talking about their government, the stranglehold the government has, the suppression of information they have. We don't have that in the United States. To a certain degree, we do, obviously. Big tech censorship, the corporate propaganda press will run lies. But this show exists, so we're clearly better than China. But that's also, as much as it is a strength, it's something they exploit. They know there are people in this country that they can pay who will say whatever needs to be said because we don't have a cohesive shared culture anymore. It used to be, we were talking about this last week with the fall of empires. I think Zuby was bringing this up, that when you no longer have the idea of like God in country, I don't mean that literally God in country, I mean like this idea of like, this is our country, this is what we believe, this is what we share, this is our experience. When you don't have that anymore, your country can be gutted, ripped apart, and that precipitates the collapse. So now I see what's happening with China. They're absolutely exploiting our political divisions. How much longer can we last when you have the 1,000 Talents program? China goes in and they pay professors to give up our research, where you've got stories about Chinese nationals ferrying viruses and vials getting caught and arrested. There's no respect for this country. And the problem is we don't have a unified culture. We have a culture war, which means they can keep just chipping away at the crack until the rock splits.
Well, and that's the intent. The culture war is at least partially being fostered by the Chinese. It's part of the reason they censor our culture. I have a young friend who's on the UC Berkeley campus, one of the most liberal campuses in the country. She's half ethnic Chinese. Her mom was ethnic Chinese. She was raised in her family to hate America. She was raised to believe that this is a vile, terrible place, that Americans are not to be trusted, and that eventually China would prevail. And China specifically meaning the CCP. That's on a mainstream college campus. That culture, that idea is supported. She said the majority of the Chinese that she knew on campus believed this. You know, she's welcome to walk in those communities because of her partial ethnic Chinese background. And she said it's just horrendous. It's totally anti-American, and it is at the forefront of culture on our college campuses all across the country.
How long can something like this go on for, especially... You know, when I look at Pelosi going to Taiwan, my question is, for what purpose does it serve? Like you were saying just a moment ago, that's a lot of what people are asking. Is it a distraction? Is it the Democrats are failing so miserably that she's like, well, this will shake up the news cycle and get us off the recession? Maybe the idea is like wartime presidents do well. Maybe if I go there and confront China on something, it'll be good for the Democratic Party.
Yeah, to me, it seems like a distraction. I mean, it's an excellent political distraction. They've got no good news that the Democratic Party can run on, right? The economy is a shamble. Our industries are falling apart. Our standing in the international community is at an all-time low. Their own base despises them basically at this point. If you look at the numbers among Hispanics, we've never seen anything like this in the modern history of the country. 24% approval rating for Biden among Hispanics, lower than among whites. I mean, it's really extraordinary. So she needs to do something. She needs to roll some kind of political hand grenade in the room to try to distract.
Yeah, I have taken the approach throughout my time in politics, when someone does something that I think is good for the country, even though they may be doing it for the wrong reason, I commend them for doing it. And so I'm not going to say anything negative about Nancy Pelosi going there, because I think it's the right thing to do. The fact that the Biden administration did not want her to go, and it was very clear they didn't want her to go because they were afraid of China's reaction, and she stood up to them and obviously said she was going. Again, there may be politics behind it. Everybody does everything for a reason. What's your theory on why
she did that?
I don't know. I have no idea. It makes no sense to me why she's doing it, other than maybe she understands. I can't understand how people don't understand how big a threat China is and how important this conflict is. And look, we tend to think of everybody on the other side is just horrible, terrible on everything, and they don't care about America anyway. I serve with these people, and I think 90% of the time that's true. But there are people that do care about the security of our country and understand that China is a threat on the other side of the aisle. Maybe she's one of them. Again, I may be giving her more credit than she deserves, but I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt because she's doing the right thing.
I respect her going to Taiwan, but I question it, obviously. And it's like, I really don't like her as a person, everything she represents, the elitism of politics. I think she's a bad person. I think she's manipulative. I think she's overly emotional. I think she and her cohorts created untold problems in the United States during the Trump years with the obsession over Russia and the lies they espoused. And I think it's
all
fair
that's
to
true.
Say, right. And
all that's true.
But I do, respect to going to Taiwan, I guess. But
I know her. I served with her. I spent time. I know Nancy. I mean, we're not buddies, but and so this is a real head scratcher for me. But
yeah,
give her her due.
Look, thinking about the current state of the culture war, and I'm thinking about we've got the first 10 minutes of the show were like World War III, China, what's happening, and now it's like civil war. Are we heading in that direction? Can people trust the politicians? We've got people in the chat who are saying you're a rhino. Right, but
that's me.
That Republican in name only.
That's me.
Obviously, nobody.
And I bet you they've been involved in politics and have worked on conservative causes for 40 years, just like I have. I bet I'm a rhino, right?
Oh yeah.
This is the problem I have. I have so many people come up to me who have been a conservative for 20 minutes, and they say, "Oh, this guy's a rhino." Yeah, this guy's a rhino who, if you Google my name, you see what kind of rhino I am. That I've been ostracized for the last 20 years for standing up for cultural truths and for standing up for free markets. And look, I respect everybody can have their opinion on things. And one of the things that I realized is you just go do the right thing and don't worry about what other people say about you. And so I'm out here right now where I'm teaming up with another guy who's called a rhino on occasion, right?
Yep.
Because
among other things,
for standing up for the ultimate in our constitutional freedoms, which is federalism. The idea that America will end up, candidly, in a civil war if we don't begin to respect that people in some areas of the states are going to live their lives differently than people in other areas of the states. And by the way, that was the case from the very beginning. That's what our founders understood could hold a country together as big and diverse. Even at that point, we were talking about 13 colonies, but they saw the vastness of of what could be the United States. And they realized over a country of this size, you're going to have people who are going to behave and want different lifestyles. People who are going to live in the mountains are not going to be the same as people who are going to live in the cities. And the idea that we're going to have a central government that's powerful, that's going to make everybody have the same ideas and philosophies and not give local control and freedom to states and communities and families to live their lives the way they want, they realized that was a loser. And so federalism was the approach. And that's what we're trying to restore through this process.
Rhode Island.
Yeah.
It's basically a city
yeah.
that has 2 senators.
That should have lost a seat in Congress during the last census, but they messed up.
Oh,
their
wow,
data.
really?
Yeah.
Wow. I just think it's funny when the Democrats come out and they're like, why does Wyoming get 2 senators? I'm like, why does Rhode Island? It's like I understand there's
Delaware.
many people there.
Delaware, exactly.
Yeah, right. Delaware and is only a tiny bit bigger. So I got to tell you, man, I don't envy you being in politics. People are always mentioning like, will you ever consider politics? And I'm like, no, never. There's no way to represent everybody, and that's exactly what the founding fathers understood.
Look, I think that it's a ridiculous idea that you're going to represent everybody. I mean, you have to be mentally ill to be able to represent everybody. There's such diversity in this country. People have always said, how did you do it? How did you go to Washington? And because I always felt like my duty was to gather as much information as I could, look at the context of which everything was done, and make the best decision, and then make your case as to why it's right for America, and not worry about the electoral consequence, because you can't just go out and jump from whatever the poll says from one time to another. Look, there's truth. I believe in it. I believe there is a truth, and I believe that our founders put together a process that in our Constitution that works, and you just follow those 2 things: the truth and aligning with the Constitution. You'll be fine.
Yeah, I look at we often will talk about here who's right in the culture war, the left or the right. What does left and right even mean? Right? I grew up liberal, and here I am being called right wing because one simple reason. I know what's going on in the media. So a really great example, I know what's going on in politics. A really good example is we had a guest on the show who claimed, I said, Joe Biden said, if you want the $1 billion, you got to fire the prosecutor. And he looked at me, smirked, and said, that never happened. And then I pulled up the video and played it for him, and he was shocked. This is what makes you right-wing these days. That if you show a video in the news that people are talking about, they don't know. Why? Because CNN's lying, because MSNBC is lying. On occasion, Fox News even. So when you've got, here's what I see. It's the rule for the Democrats that they are misleading you. It is the exception with Republicans that they're misleading you. There are a lot of bad Republicans. They're often misleading you. But there's a handful of really good ones. On the Democrat side, we had Tulsi Gabbard, I thought, was being honest. I didn't agree with some of her political positions. Look what happened to her. Now she's going on Fox News. Now she's alt-right now. I know. It's because when you talk about what's true, that clearly makes you right-wing, even if your political positions. How do we salvage, I hate to say it, this country? How do we save it? When you've got people who believe media lies, that the media can just make something up, claim you're the one making it up. And the example I always give, these are the people who believe Jussie Smollett. These are the people who chased after the Russiagate narrative for years and spent tens of millions of dollars. These are the people who smeared the Covington Catholic kids. Clearly, they got a track record of being wrong. But there are people who just never break out of those lies. How do you do it? Especially when we're talking about for you, or anyone else who's in office, you're showing up and you're like, okay, that's not true, Nancy. The thing you're saying about Trump didn't happen. Why do you believe that? And then she votes on something based on a fabrication. They vote because Jussie Smollett said something.
The only thing you can do is continue to fight and tell the truth. I mean, that's all you have. And I would make the argument. I mean, look at this show as an example. I got involved in politics a lifetime ago. I was first elected to Congress in 1990. I was 32 years old. And the only way I could ever get the truth out was to buy an ad. Talk radio didn't even exist. I mean, Rush Limbaugh was just getting started back then. Everything was whatever the newspaper or the television said. And there weren't cable news networks even back then. So all you had was the national media and then your local media. And if you had a dissenting voice, you either had to run a campaign and buy ads, or you had to knock on as many doors as you could. So the idea that we are powerless to fight against these lies, you're a case in point where that simply isn't true. The reality is we have more opportunity to get our point across today than we've ever had. Now, they have more opportunities to get there because there's more media generally. The bigger problem we have is not that we can't get our message out. It's how do you talk to people that don't agree with you? That's the problem. The problem is we're siloed. Everybody just gets, information that agrees with their point of view, and they discount to the point of not believing anything that comes from people that they don't agree with.
It's true, but it is the rule on the left and the exception on the right. There's a decent amount of people on the right who believe fake things and they just look for tribal answers.
Yep.
But on the left, it is the rule.
It's a way of life.
Yeah. So,
yeah.
For instance,
because they don't believe in truth. I mean, so that
Correct.
let's just get to the bottom line.
I completely agree.
They believe in they have
Power.
a relativism point of view.
My truth.
It's my truth, and whatever they think is the truth. And conservatives, by and large, not all, because we have some I-truth folks on our side too, but overall, I think you're right. It's the exception.
Yep.
We believe there is a truth, there is a right and wrong, there is reason, and through reason you can come to a conclusion. They don't believe that anymore. It's how I feel.
Exactly.
It comes. I always go ahead.
I was going to say they don't believe in truth. They believe there is no truth but power.
Correct.
That's it.
Which actually, the roots of it, even in our modern culture today, come from Marxism. I mean, that is the
Literally
core
Marxism.
ideal
Yeah.
of Marxism. And ultimately, one of the things that Marxists do, and they've always done throughout history, is if you can control what people say, You can control what they think. If you can control what they think, you control reality, essentially, and you're in total control then. This is the ultimate aim of totalitarianism, and ultimately that is the aim of the modern Democratic Party.
And that's why you see a complete effort to redefine everything, to make words mean nothing.
Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.